For 95% of homes, we're doing the exact same marketing that a traditional agent would do. And for those really high-end homes that are in the $10, $15 million range, in some markets, it might even be $3-4 million that it takes to hit that threshold, depending on that market. But those are markets where the agent actually does rely on their network to try and sell a home, right? At the $16 million, $20 million range. Right. For a $1 million home, there is nothing but people finding it online, people finding it through whatever source they're finding homes through. 92% of buyers found homes themselves first and sent them to their agents and said, set up a showing, right?
That was the stat that I didn't know off the top of my head that you did know.
Yep, 92%, according to NAR.
Welcome to the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast, where nothing is off limits. If you're interested in buying, selling, or investing in real estate, and you want to learn some of the insider secrets and uncensored truths from the true professionals in and around real estate, you've come to the right place. Now, let's buckle up for the uncensored truth about real estate and join your host, Brian Cardenas.
All right, everybody, welcome to the next episode of the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast. Thank you for joining us. If you're catching us on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you find out when the next episode drops. And if you are catching us on your favorite podcast platform, we'd love it if you would give us a 5-star review, and please share the episode and the podcast with your friends if you feel like they could get a lot out of the information we share here today. And I wanted to introduce our special guest here. We have Lindsay McLean with Homelister with us. Lindsay, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, it's a very prestigious podcast to get on, so you're pretty lucky, I gotta say.
I'm very excited to have a good conversation about real estate. They're always a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you're doing something different out there than the typical real estate professional is doing. So can you kind of just start off maybe with your background a little bit and then how you progressed to where you're at today?
Sure. So originally I was a software engineer and burned out on software during the first .com, went back to business school and did real estate and finance and became a real estate developer. So I spent a couple of years doing real estate development. And I was always on the owner developer side and had a couple of companies. And when we sold those, I was selling my own condo in New York. And I did the typical thing. I hired a real estate agent. I used the same agent I'd used to rent multiple times in New York. And when I got to the sale process, I really hated it. Everything was administrative. It was slow. There were errors. And on the buy side and on the rental side, even, they're helping you to identify where you want to live. They're helping you to identify, talk about neighborhoods, ask questions, helping you make real life decisions. On the sell side, it's a very transactional experience. So they're listing the home, they're taking pictures, they're helping you schedule showings, and then they're evaluating contracts as they come in and offers as they come in. And so I was really frustrated with the experience to begin with, but it was a condo in New York. It was going to sell, and we sold in 4 days at the price that I set doing my own research. And I got to the closing table and wrote a 6-figure check for like 8 hours of work, and it blew my mind.
Wow.
And I couldn't quite swallow that and feel good about it. And so I started looking at the industry, and for my own benefit, I wanted to see what companies were out there because I wanted to know if I was going to sell again, what I was going to do, because I just wasn't going to pay 6 figures for 8 hours of work again. I couldn't stomach it.
Hard to justify that.
Yeah. And it was really shocking to me that what I wanted didn't exist. I coming from a software background, I assume anything can really be facilitated by software. And so, I was looking for a company that did that took that helped you list the home, helped you get the details out there, helped you get on the MLS in New York. It's a little different than an MLS, but similar. And guided you through the process, but you would do the showings yourself because you can, and would be more cost effective. And I was really shocked that no really professional version of that existed. There are flat fee MLS companies out there that are very low support. There are, discount brokers out there, which you kind of get what you pay for. And I just wasn't really satisfied. So that's where the company comes from. Homelister is effectively, it's a new, better way to sell your home. It's a way to allow you to manage the process of selling your home through our online software, And then we have a full brokerage team supporting that so you can get as much help as you need whenever you want it, but it's up to you how much you want. So if you wanted to sell your home with us, you go on our website, you put your address in, it'll walk you through the whole process, start to finish. And there's always a human available at customer service and 7 days a week available to answer calls. And that's really what I wanted when I was selling my home. And so that's what we built. We built a better experience. We have people selling in 19 states, and the experience is the same across all 19 states, which is that people are happier with the experience than they are with the other options available to them.
So obviously, the big impetus for that for you and probably a lot of people that might be interested in what you do is the cost savings. There's, especially on a higher end property, it's a significant commission that you're paying out to the real estate agent. But from the service standpoint, when you say that you're improving the experience and the service level, how can people know that that's going to be true if they don't have somebody necessarily coming into their house, sitting down with them, going through numbers with them? Because I'm assuming that this is mostly an online and over the phone service that you're providing.
Yeah. So the way it works is we offer various levels of service. We have a couple of different packages, and you can choose the amount of support you want throughout. If you are super confident that all you want is the listing and some basic things like a yard sign, or the showing scheduling software, things like that, you would start out at our basic level, and you could add anything you wanted throughout the process a la carte. So that would be offer review, contract review. You can add that at any time. If you wanted a more full service like experience, then you would go to our platinum plan, which is effectively the same amount of guidance in advice and staging advice and pricing advice that you get from a full service agent, but it's entirely virtual. So they don't come to your home, but they do sit down with you. They do a full market report, CMA, and they'll help you price the home. They'll help you evaluate other homes that have sold in the area and timing, how you might want to schedule that. But then when it comes down to it, they list their home, and buyers contact you directly for you to schedule the showings. So we're not managing your showing schedule for you. And that's like the biggest difference, is that people do their own showings, they do their own open houses, but they get the same level of professional expertise and support throughout the process.
So, and I'm probably going to be like the person that's trying to poke holes in your system.
Yeah.
So forgive me, because I talk to agents all the time, but I'm sure you're used to this. So I know a lot of agents would say, in that case, they don't recommend that a seller be present when a buyer is coming through and looking at the home. Your system is obviously designed to have it work that way. Why does that work for you? How has that not become a problem in terms of buyer and seller directly communicating?
It works very similar to when a full service traditional agent would be doing it. So let's say you have a buyer coming through who has an agent. You could still choose not to be present for that because you're relying on the buyer's agent, that they're with their client and they're going to walk through. That's often very similar to what a real estate agent that's representing you might do, where they might just open the door and stand there. They don't really walk through with a buyer's agent and the buyer through the whole process. So the buyer is going to have a very similar experience to a traditional agent if you're just opening the door. If you have a buyer who is unrepresented, then you can make that choice, whether you want to allow them to walk around freely or if you want to accompany them. But in that case, we have found that it's really a mixed bag. A lot of our sellers, we actually get feedback from buyers that they did a great job selling the home, that they had really interesting tidbits to provide. And I think it really depends on the seller, whether they, to know whether they're going to be helpful through the process or intrusive in the process. Sometimes we'll get that feedback from agents. So one of the things we provide is every time there's a showing agent showing, that feedback goes directly to the seller. So that's something that traditional agents won't provide to you, but our sellers get to see every single piece of feedback that any buyer who has an agent provides as they go through that home. So if an agent says, well, the sellers shouldn't have been there, they were detrimental, then we can say, okay, so we got that feedback, and here's what we recommend you do next. We also a lot of times get the feedback that the owners were great, we had a really great showing. And so I would say more often than not, they actually do a pretty good job.
Well, and it makes sense because they know the house, like they've lived there. They know all of the good things about it. They know the neighborhoods. They know everything, every little detail there is to know. And a listing agent just doesn't. I mean, they might have been there a few times, to go do the listing appointment, take photos and do all that kind of stuff. Maybe there was an inspection, but they've been there a handful of times. It always amazed me, like for buyer's agents, buyer's agents go with their buyers and walk through a house and they don't know the house. They've probably never seen it before. And yet they're pretending to be the person to show them around. Like, this is a kitchen, obviously.
Right.
The fridge and the stove usually are in the kitchen.
I mean, my experience when I was selling, and I think a lot of people will find this, is that my agent I would spend, here's how a whole showing would go. I would spend hours making the house look like no one had ever lived there, right? Cleaning it up so that, it's perfectly clean. It looks like a picture. And that for every single showing, that takes an incredible amount of work. And then my agent would show up at the last minute, open the door and stand there. I would leave. I would have to vacate the home, but she would just stand at the door, and then the buyer and the buyer's agent would walk through, and she wasn't actually participating in that. And I mean, I can stand there and open the door, right? And that was really where this came from, is I can do that. I can really open the door if I just spend an hour cleaning the place. Yeah. But then what would happen is they would have questions about the home, right? And so they would ask my agent questions, and all she could do was say, I'll get you answers, right? And she would come back and bring me the questions, and then I would answer them over email or whatever, and then she would send them on. But she wasn't able to answer any of those detailed questions that weren't really surface. And so we find that people actually really appreciate being able to get those answers while they're standing there. What we recommend for a lot of owners, if there's a buyer's agent, what we recommend is staying out of the way, but being available if somebody wants to ask you questions. Yeah.
So if you're coaching them on how to handle that process, that helps a lot, because I mean, I've seen sometimes where the sellers feel like they are the main person who is responsible for showing every aspect of the house, like being the salesperson about it. And that kind of has made buyers, a little bit uncomfortable. Sure. And I think what sometimes people don't realize is you're going to go and list your house for sale. When buyers want to come see the house, they're going to go through and schedule it. Now everybody's using scheduling apps. So it's a lot easier than it used to be, where your agent would call you and say, hey, can you get out of the house, Thursday at 4:00? Now it's all done by app. So if you take that middle person out of the way and just let the seller work on their schedule and make sure that it works, approve it through the app, and then they can still vacate the house if they really don't want to be present, or if the buyer's agent doesn't want them to be present. And the reality is, maybe it was different in New York with higher end properties, but most of the rest of the country, on an average priced home, listing agents don't go to showings. They're generally not there. It's probably the rarity that a listing agent actually is there for showings, except for an open house. So I think from the seller's side of it, you're really not losing much in terms of services by not having a listing agent present at the house to show the property, right? That's right. And that's the feedback that we get from our sellers, is that, it was pretty much the same experience. A lot of the feedback that we get is that they were a lot more unsure before the process began. But that as they went through the process, they actually ended much more confident than they were with previous agents, because we explain what's happening next, and we walk them through the process, and we give them advice, and we tell them why we give them advice, right? So we don't just say, do this. We say, here's what you should do, and here's why. Here's how to fix buyers. And so, they come out of it feeling like not only did they not really miss much, but that they actually felt more confident about the process and knew what was going on, and felt like they were more confident in the decisions that they made as a seller. I'm going to just tag on to that conversation about scheduling as well. It is all done through apps now, but one of the things we found that was really surprising when we started the company, and I'll admit I expected this to be opposite, but we are faster to contract than a traditional agent on average. And I'll tell you my theory on that, which is just that if you're a traditional agent and you've got 6 or 7 homes that you have for sale, and you list a new home this weekend, you might get 15 showing requests, but you can't take all 15 showing requests because you have several others. Now that's assuming that
a listing agent is going to show up. They don't always.
Right.
And I'd say that in certain parts of the country, they don't at all, but in certain parts of the country, they do. Whereas our sellers, they don't have that restriction of having to juggle multiple homes, having to reply to email on multiple homes. So they tend to be faster to respond. We find that they just say, okay, it's Saturday, Sunday, we got 15 requests, line them up, let's get this done. And they're much faster to respond to requests from buyers, to questions from buyers. One of the complaints that people get is that, I tried contacting your agent 15 times and they never responded, right? Like they'll send something in on Zillow, nothing happens. That doesn't happen with us because it goes straight to the owner to respond to.
Yeah, and the owner's obviously got the most vested interest in making sure that they are quick to respond and answer all the questions thoroughly and make sure that they're taking care of everything. So, I can see for sure in the last couple of years where, we had massive supply shortage and there were just buyers falling out of the sky and everybody was, trying to outbid each other. Now it's sort of shifted in a lot of markets to where it's either more balanced or it's maybe slightly to a buyer's market where marketing the property is becoming more and more important, where it probably wasn't actually very important in the last couple of years. How do you guys compensate for that? Are you guys providing additional marketing services beyond what's just putting it on MLS?
So basically what an agent will do is put it on the MLS. If you talk to any agent, that's marketing homes below the 85th percentile in their own market. So in some markets, that might be $1 million. In some markets, that might be $4 million. But they're really just putting it on the MLS and waiting for buyers. They don't do a whole lot else in terms of marketing. We offer a couple of additional things that they don't offer. We offer some online marketing packages that traditional agents don't really offer or take advantage of. But by and large, the way most people find homes is through the real estate sites. So it's through Zillow and it's through Redfin and it's through Realtor.com. And the way to get on all those sites is through the MLS. And so in some respects, we're doing the exact same thing a traditional agent would do. We do offer a couple of additional things. We offer custom marketing flyers that, you can, custom flyers that you can, that we'll make for you and you can give to buyers that are nicely laid out and you can put any information on them you want. We offer in terms of marketing, the full gamut of what an agent can do. So it's professional photography, it's 3D walkthroughs, it's aerial photography and videos. And we encourage our sellers. A lot of times agents will choose not to do that stuff because it costs them money up front and they don't get paid until closing. And so some agents will do it and some won't. We really encourage all our sellers to take advantage of these because it's not that expensive in the context of selling your home. And it makes a huge difference when you're selling to have professional photos, to have aerials if there's a lot of land involved, to have a 3D walkthrough. We find that 3D walkthroughs are much more effective than videos. And so that, we go through everything we do is sort of statistics based. If 3D walkthroughs are more likely to get showings than videos are, then that's what we encourage our sellers to do.
So you are kind of breaking a myth there, I think, that is perpetuated a lot of times, in that there's all this extra marketing done. And in some cases there is. I mean, typically on the higher end stuff,
Sure.
They may have extravagant broker opens, they may,
Yep.
publish in magazines and different things like that. But for the majority of homes, you're right, there isn't much being done. Most of it is automated when it goes on to the MLS. It's syndicated out to all these other sites, and that's where people are finding the houses. I mean, the majority of people, and you probably have the statistics at the top of your head better than I do, but the vast majority of people are actually finding their home themselves and
Yep.
then going to their agent and saying, what about this one? Whereas in years past, it used to be the agent scouring to find something that met the needs, setting up the filters in their searches, and then coming to the buyers with, a property that might meet their needs. Doesn't happen that way anymore, though, does it?
Not at all. And so just to start with, for 95% of homes, we're doing the exact same marketing that a traditional agent would do. And for those really high-end homes that are in the $10, $15 million range, in some markets, it might even be $3-4 million that it takes to hit that threshold, depending on that market. But those are markets where the agent actually does rely on their network to try and sell a home, right? At the $16 million, $20 million range. For
Right.
a $1 million home, there is nothing but people finding it online, people finding it through whatever source they're finding homes through. 92% of buyers found homes themselves first and sent them to their agents and said, set up a showing, right?
That
So,
was the stat that I didn't know off the top of my head that you did know.
yep, 92%, according to NAR. But so the 92% were doing their own searching. The interesting thing is that as the job of a real estate agent has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. So it used to be that they were true brokers of information. You had to go to an agent to find out how to price your home, how to find out what the home down the street sold for, to find buyers. As a buyer, you had to go to agents to find out what was for sale, how to make an offer and price it. None of this information was publicly available. And that's all changed. I mean, Zillow really revolutionized the amount of information out there, and buyers and sellers' abilities to know what was going on in the market without talking to an intermediary broker just to get that information. So that part of the job as the gatekeeper, the true broker of information, is gone, and it's never coming back, right? All that information is available to every buyer and to every seller at the drop of a mouse click, right? And so when you look at how homes are found and sold, people are no longer relying on their agents, except at the top of the market, to say, oh, hey, these are the homes I think you should look at. They do their own searches. Nobody who wants to buy a home doesn't go out and do their own searches. They want to know what's available, right?
Well, we have that desire to have the information now. You know, we don't have any patience. We have to have everything now. And if you have to rely on a human to be able to get back to you, you know, if they're maybe busy showing another property or doing a listing appointment, you're not going to get what you want immediately. And so now everybody's got an app on their phone to go find what they want right now. And
and even 10 years ago when I was selling my last place, you know, I would send things to my agent from in New York. It was Street Easy, but everywhere else, it's Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin. And she would tell me, and I would say, how come we haven't seen this one? She'd say, well, Zillow gets it faster than my internal system gets it. Right. So, you know, she'd be like, it's better for you to just do the searching on your own because you'll find it faster.
Wow.
That's just the reality.
I've never heard an agent say that, because I mean, Zillow's getting the feed from the MLS. How does it not show up on MLS first before Zillow gets it, unless it was put on Zillow?
Well, a lot of MLSs are not the most innovative technologies out there. And it's not that the MLS doesn't have that data, but it's the reporting. So they might not get the alerts right away. They might not. So if they went in and they sat there and they searched every 5 minutes, then they would find it. It's in there. But it doesn't mean that they've been made aware of it and buyers have been made aware of it. The public sites are actually faster.
Do you see the typical buyer being represented by an agent, or do you seem to attract a higher percentage of unrepresented buyers than what a traditional listing might do?
We actually find that about 2/3 of our buyers are represented and about 1/3 are not. And that mirrors the greater market. And that number of unrepresented buyers has been going up over time. I would actually argue in the last year, it probably went up. We don't have, the market doesn't have great stats on that from the last year yet. But what we find is that our sellers tend to sell to the exact same buyers, because to a buyer, a home listed through us is just listed through us as the agent, and it looks the same to a buyer as any other home listed by any other agent. So we don't tend to see any real difference in who's attracted to the homes. It's just buyers who are looking at homes and they're looking at the whole pool, and they don't really care, you know, the name of the listing agent that got it onto the MLS.
Sure.
So we see that our for us it's pretty standard with the rest of the market.
So it seems like basically what you found is you found a point of friction in the transaction process, at least on the seller side of it, and you tried to remove that point of friction, which is a human being that's in the local market. But you know, if they can't bring the level of service that is expected for the level of compensation that's being paid, and that's a friction. And you guys seem to have kind of taken out that point of friction and reduced the cost, and really haven't lost any efficiency or experience for the seller.
No, and in fact, our sell-through rate is usually a couple of percentage points above the broader market. And you know, some of that can be attributed to motivated sellers. Some of that can be attributed to the crazy market of the last couple of years. But our sellers don't feel like they lost anything. And if you read through reviews, people will talk about, I saved $40,000, which is crazy. And there's nowhere else in American finance where you can walk down the street and save $40,000 by doing a couple of hours of work yourself. Right. So that in itself is crazy, but that's actually not even what people rave about. They talk about how it was a better process, how they felt more confident with their sale, and that they would never go back to a traditional agent because we give them control, we give them transparency, and they're not really losing anything in that process. So it's, at least that's what they felt like. There's certainly sales out there that require that are complicated sales, that might be a unique property where you're looking for a really specific buyer. There are sales where, there are people who can certainly just afford to pay six figures for a couple of hours of work and don't care. Right. Or there are people who it's worth it to them to just hand it off and they're just not going to risk it. But by and large, what our sellers have started with is, well, there's no harm in trying. Right. So a lot of our early marketing was give it a try. It might work for you. Right. You might save $40,000 because you tried something for 3 weeks. And it turns out that the homes sell just as well. And so the experience has been, okay, well, this is actually better. And I didn't lose anything, but there's also very little risk in trying it at the same time.
You want to buy a house, but high interest rates have got you down? Take the rate challenge and send us a verifiable loan estimate from another lender, and we'll beat it and pay for your appraisal up to $600. Here at Give Mortgage, being powered by UMortgage allows us to provide you with unmatched speed and efficiency and the best rates and fees in the market, all while delivering you the concierge level service you deserve. We want you to have an experience getting a mortgage that you'll never forget, and not because you got put through a meat grinder to get it. At Give Mortgage, we give great advice, we give the best rates, and we give back to charity. Visit us at www.give-mortgage.com or call us at 480-331-4684 to schedule a free consultation to see how we can help.
So another thing that a traditional agent may say to a seller to counter your argument about things is, well, when you get into a situation where you've got to negotiate, you have a skilled negotiator on your side by having me do it versus, this company that, you've got somebody in an office in another state doing the negotiations for you. They don't know your market as well, your neighborhood. How do you address that?
So if we're handling negotiations for you as part of the package that you choose, that's being handled by an experienced agent in state, not in another state. So he's somebody who has experience and obviously licensed in your state. And we tend to hire only really experienced agents who have seen pretty much everything. So while they may not know your block of your neighborhood, they rely on you to tell them. So you can say, okay, well, in that conversation, they reference this house down the block, but you should know that that's, that block has more traffic, or something like that. So you can tell them and they'll incorporate that. But by and large, the way buyers are looking at homes, one of the pushback that we get from agents sometimes is, well, you can't price a home correctly through a CMA because you don't know all the little details. And what we tell our sellers is actually it doesn't really matter because that's not how buyers price homes. The way that buyers price homes, they're gonna pull a straight CMA out of the MLS, and they're gonna say, here it is compared to other homes that have sold recently on a price per square foot basis. They're not gonna say, well, you have black marble instead of gray, and so I'm gonna increase the price. Except for really exceptional buyers, they're looking at it as what are the comps in the neighborhood, the same comps that we're looking at, and how do I account for that? And so we talk it through with you, and we tell our sellers what buyers are going to see when their agents pull the comp reports, which is even more important than being able to say, okay, well, I think my house is a little bit better than the one next door, but it won't matter to a buyer because they're not seeing the house next door, right? They're seeing your house and they're seeing the comp reports, and that's it. And so our sellers go into the pricing conversation armed with how is a buyer going to look at this? If I were a buyer's agent, how am I running that comp for you? And that's how we approach it for them.
One of the things that agents, will run into a lot with their sellers is, people tend to value their house more so than what another person buying it might value it at. And people have maybe a little bit of an unrealistic expectation on what they can sell it for. How do your agents kind of coach them to what's a realistic number? I mean, it's the same conversation, I guess, a local person is going to have with them as your agent would. You do have to kind of get them off of that pedestal that they place their house on and get them into where's the reality at, where are buyers' expectations at?
Yeah. And I think we probably push harder than a local agent would push, because what we're saying is, here is how a buyer will run a comp report. This is what they'll see. And then we'll get into, let's talk about appraisers. Appraisers don't know your neighborhood. If you want the loan to appraise for what you're going to sell it for, here's what they need to see. So let's talk about that. And a lot of agents will leave the appraisal out. But in the last year, a really important thing that's been happening in the market is that they'll make a deal and they'll sell their home for more than they thought they could, but then it won't appraise. So we take we start with telling them how it will appraise or how we think it might appraise, and giving some of that. And that's basically a CMA. It's this, and then going through the process of looking at this from the buyer's perspective, which is, I think agents tend to shy away from that a bit, but it's an important way to look at it. If you're managing your sale, you have to know what the buyers are thinking. And as we push on them, we say, I think that agents are more likely to actually tell you that you can sell for more than you can. And it's a really well-known tactic that most people, if you interview 4 agents, they're going to pick the one who says they can sell it for the most, right? That's just really common. So a lot of agents will make it a habit to inflate the price they think they can sell it at and say, and get you listed. And then 3 weeks or 4 weeks in, go, oh, well, we have to drop it a little bit. The market's not quite as strong as I thought. And we don't do any of that. We're just straightforward with people. If they want to sell with us, we're giving them our best advice. And we're saying, here's what we really think your market is at based on what's happened in the last couple of months. Now, that was challenging, this year as the market changed pretty rapidly month over month. But for us, it's about giving people data and explaining that data. So the more information we give them rather than the narrative, it's telling them why we think this. It's because we see these 3 other sales on your block, and here's what that represents. And just giving them more information. People really, I think, appreciate being treated like an intelligent human being who can understand what's going on in that data when we show it to them. And if they disagree, then they still list their house at what they want to list it at. And there are certainly people who will list it too high and then come back and say, okay, you were right.
Yeah.
And that's their choice. They can list it high and take and see if it sells. But we don't sugarcoat it for them. We tell them the truth of what we think, right? And if we think they can sell it for more, we'll tell them that. But we are aligned because we just want to get the home sold, right? We're not trying to. They're already signed up for us by the time that we're giving them our pricing decisions, or our pricing advice. And so we don't have to try and give them inflated pricing advice in order to win the sale.
That's an important point, because I think a lot of home sellers don't necessarily understand that there's definitely that tactic out there where, an agent will, not all of them, but some of them will tell you what you want to hear to get that listing. And then there's scheduled price reductions. Like, they know 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 2 weeks, whatever it's going to be, automatic, okay, 5,000 or 10,000, we're just going to start coming down until we sell it. And that is an approach that some agents take, and they do it all the time because they know people want to hear that higher price, and they get them under contract. And then it's just, take them down the ladder until it finally gets to the point where it should have been in the beginning. And you guys don't have that even enter into the equation because it's all flat fee. And right. It's not an incentive, like, how much are you going to charge? How much will you get me? Like, we're going to get you what the market's going to give you. We're just going to charge you a flat fee. And I think the other thing too that most consumers don't understand is that real estate agents, by and large, well, they definitely don't, as a part of their licensing process and education process, they don't get taught how to value properties. Like, most real estate agents do not understand how appraisers value properties, and being on the lending side of it, I've actually had training for appraising. I review appraisals all the time. I understand how they do that. And real estate agents going out there and telling people, hey, this is what you can sell your house worth, or what your house is worth and what we can sell it for. But I don't really know how an appraiser is going to value it. And an appraiser is a big factor in most sales because you need one for the loan. So, you guys giving them impartial, unbiased advice on it is no different than another agent trying to give them advice on it, except there's definitely a reason for them to try to overinflate the number in order to get the listing.
Right. By the time we're doing the pricing, our incentives are totally aligned, right? Which is just, we want you to sell for the most we think you can sell, get the most you can. And I think that by and large, our homes do tend to sell. There's lots of data showing that, services like ours is a little bit different than some of the ones that have existed in the past, but that the homes actually sell for slightly more. And the reason for that is that agents' incentives aren't truly aligned, right? What agents want is to get the deal closed. Sometimes what they want is to have another agent in their office get the deal so that the brokerage can take both ends of the commission. There's all kinds of reasons why agents don't always show you all the offers. It's incredibly common that agents will not show their sellers all the offers that were received. And there's lots of reasons for it, but can you believe it's not even required of them to show you all the offers? So the National Association of Realtors published a new rule last year, a new ethics rule, which is that if you as a buyer's agent submit an offer to a seller's agent and you ask the seller's agent if they presented it to the seller, they're no longer allowed to lie to you about whether or not they presented it to the seller. They're still not required to present it to the seller, but they can no longer lie to the buyer's agent about it.
Wow.
And we get people who come to us and say, like, I had a terrible experience with an agent and I'm switching. Like, I can't stand it. And a lot of times, anecdotally, if you ask around, it's, you'll get that people's experience with agents is that they didn't hear about 3 of the offers, even though one of them might have been higher. That agent might say, well, this other one I think is more likely to close because the agent in my office is working with them, so I know who the buyers are. And that just means that's not that they actually know who the buyers are. That's just that they want their office to get the other end of the commission. They don't care that you get 10,000 less because it's so little difference in their commission. So those incentives really aren't aligned a lot of times. For us, the way it works is you get all those communications automatically, right? You get to see every email that we receive on your list. And you get to see every offer, every communication, every piece of feedback. And that, I find, has helped our customers actually understand what's really happening in the market a little bit better. If they're seeing that feedback and saying, okay, the feedback is that it's priced too high. Like, they're much more likely, if they've seen that feedback from 4 showings in a row, that's more impactful, seeing that raw data and that raw comment than their agent trying to tell them, no, it's really about the pricing. And so, that transparency, I think, is huge to the process. People trust someone they don't know all that well to be guiding them correctly. And a lot of times agents just aren't. There's plenty of really good agents out there. They're just not the majority. No,
and because it's the training in most states for licensure is somewhere in the 80 to 100 hours of training. And if any agency you talk to, they teach you all about the laws and the regulations and some facts and figures, but they don't teach a lot about the actual process of being a real estate salesperson. Right. They don't teach them about marketing. They do have some ethics stuff, but you just taught me something that I didn't know, that it was not against their code of ethics to lie, because there's always a suspicion that, a house has been on the market for 90 days and then you decide, oh, I might like this one. I go make an offer. Oh yeah, we just got 2 offers. Really? You just got 2 offers after 90 days. Amazing. So one of the questions I had, though, is you've dealt with this on the seller side. You've kind of eliminated a point of friction on the seller side. You've increased the transparency. I think that's really interesting that I'm gathering that whatever email address that is assigned for that transaction where any buyer's agents would be communicating with, that's all copied through to the sellers, so they see everything. I think that's fantastic. So you're not getting a filter or a filtered down version from the agent representing you. on the buyer side, have you figured out a way to get in the middle there and remove points of friction for buyers?
We actually do have buyer services coming later this year. So for buyers, when we started the company, the reason why we started with the sales side is because, one, so much of the sales side is transactional in nature or administrative in nature. It's filling out the forms. It's getting all the correct information about your homes. It's scheduling photography. It's getting a yard sign installed. There are definitely human touch points in there around pricing and strategizing and staging. But a lot of it is very automatable. And also, it's the seller who pays both the buyer and seller commission, right? And we started with it because in order to create change in the industry, you have to start with the people who are actually paying the bills. And so, what we really wanted to get to the point was where we really could do this in a large portion of the country in a way that worked across multiple states. There's different customs in different states. There's different legalities. There's different laws. There's different regulations. There's different, breakdowns around who's responsible for what, buyer and seller. And so just working through that system in terms of gathering enough information to make that smooth across, a large portion of the country, and then starting to move into buyer services. So for buyer services for us right now, we have done some testing of buyer services. And a lot of the same principles apply. There are pieces of that are not automatable on the buy side, which is, we're not going to drive around your neighborhood and help you, determine one street versus another, or figure out exactly, whether that home is too close to something that's loud, right? But I think a lot of buyers at this point don't really rely on agents for that. A lot of times people are relying on agents for that if they're moving from out of town, right? They'll use agents to learn about the town. And so that's certainly some context that, at this point we don't provide. That's not to say that we couldn't in the future through some AI capabilities, through some additional things that we're looking at. But so our next step on the buy side is actually to start taking that friction out of the actual offer process. So let's say, whether it's scheduling showings, which we can do, helping you figure out how to schedule those showings, make offers, and then through the contract process. All of that applies on both sides. And so that's really what we're looking at for later this year, is how to take those services for people who want somebody to ask questions of. They want that expertise throughout the process, but they can feel like they can, they're doing their own searching, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting point about it. Is a very much more personal process on the buy side. Like you mentioned, it's very transactional on the seller side. When you're trying to identify a niche in the business, like we talked about removing the friction, that's, I think, the biggest strategy that you can do is find where that friction is and figure out how to remove it. And I guess on the buy side of it, it's harder to pinpoint exactly the things that you can automate and where are those friction points that you can remove. Because sometimes it's just, there's a lot of people that are licensed as real estate agents. Everybody has got 3 relatives and, 8 friends that they know that are real estate agents.
We just hit an all-time high in real estate agents in this country.
Yeah. And they're not all professionals. There's part-timers, there's people that don't have a lot of experience, and, they're handling a really big transaction. And especially again, we're back in this market now where negotiating is important. And I see it all the time because, we get a glimpse sometimes into the negotiation process, just being on the lending side of it. And there's times where I have to coach agents through like how you should present things, how you should try to negotiate, or they get a counter and I'll be talking them through this. I'm like, that's not my role. I've been doing it a long time, so I'm happy to help at it, but it makes me feel pretty uncomfortable when you have the lack of professionalism or experience or negotiating skills representing a buyer. And I would think that might be, that area where, showing homes, because some agents do this. They'll have showing agents. They'll be the ones driving around. They'll take you through the houses. Those are not typically going to be roles that are going to be highly compensated roles because it doesn't require a tremendous amount of skill. But the people actually doing the negotiation, there's more value in that role that might be where, you can kind of consolidate the number of people required to do that job and remove that point of friction and just kind of separate the roles and maybe have two people handling stuff instead of one person trying to do everything.
Well, that's actually a really good point, because it's, I would say that is something that we're doing. And, at its core, a lot of what we've done on the sell side is to say, okay, in a traditional model, the real estate agent is managing the photographer, is managing the yard signs, is managing the paperwork, is managing negotiations. And what we've done in our system is we've really taken anything that doesn't involve core licensed activity, which is, like helping you strategize on your home, helping you price your home, helping you negotiate, dealing with contracts, and said, okay, it can be someone else entirely managing the yard sign or scheduling the photographer. We already do that. So, we find that we have the people who are best at something doing that thing, right? Rather than asking one person to do everything. And specifically on negotiation, I think it's actually an important point to make is that the agents that we hire, the part of the job that we focus on and that they are good at is the negotiation, right? Because they're not out there having to sell to get a listing. They're not out there having to focus on the marketing themselves, which is what agents spend so much of their time on, right? And so we're really focused on are they good at contracts? Are they good at negotiation? Do they understand all the various things? So we're hiring really experienced agents who've seen hundreds of transactions. And while they may not be local, and so that's what agents push back on us for in terms of just, online, not in a specific transaction, they've seen so many different negotiations that they understand everything that buyer agent is doing better than most agents actually do. And that's hard for other agents to really understand about our model, and that we're taking the people who are good at just the actual home sale piece, the negotiating the deal, the getting through the contract, the dealing with escrow issues, all that stuff. And we're having those people focus on your sale for you at the time that it matters. And I think that's a really hard thing for a traditional agent to be the only thing that they're good at, right? Because they have to be good at marketing themselves. They have to be good at the administrative stuff and everything else. They're juggling so many different things. So I think even on the buy side, our agents, they've seen hundreds of transactions. And that's really all they do is they focus on the negotiations and the contracts. So they're really focused on that when they're talking to you. They're focused on what is going to sell your home and how much can you really get, and who's trying to slip something into that contract that they shouldn't be slipping in, like you should be paying for something that you shouldn't be paying for.
Right.
We catch that all the time. Buyers agents are constantly putting things in that typically a buyer will pay for, and they'll list it in the contract as a seller fee or payment. And that's the stuff that other agents might not find. But because that's really our biggest focus, that's what we're finding for people.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. And we actually are having a lot of those discussions within our company as well as, in the real estate industry in general, both realtors and the loan side of it, traditionally, one person filled the role of 5 different job responsibilities, marketing, customer relations, transaction process, fulfillment, delivery. And you expect one person to be able to do all those and be good at all those. And it's not a very realistic business model. And so in both real estate and mortgage, we've seen a lot of the team concepts where we're breaking down roles into multiple people who are responsible for their areas of expertise. And that's really kind of what you guys have done, it seems to me like, is you don't have to have one person be the expert at all roles. Let's break down the roles into small pieces. Let's automate the things that can be automated. Let's have the people who are really good at the important roles focus on that. They can handle a higher volume of those things because they're not out running around showing homes, doing listing appointments, things like that. So it's a really interesting model that I think you guys have built. You probably made some enemies in the industry, I would imagine, but that I think comes along with the fact that you're disrupting what has always been done. But I think that's where progress comes from, is looking at something and determining, hey, can we do this better? And the funny thing I hear so many times in talking to real estate agents on this podcast is when I find out, how did you get into the business? Much like yourself, it was from a bad experience. And you just instinctively knew this needs to be better. And then a lot of people like yourself have decided, I'm going to figure out how to do this better. I'm going to make this better. So I think it's a pretty interesting business model. I'm kind of excited to see what you guys have coming on the buy side of it. If anybody that's watching or listening would like to reach out to you guys because they like what they hear from you, how do they get in touch with you?
So the website's just homelister.com, www.homelister.com. Our phone number is 855-400-8566. And that's our customer service line. So you can find out about our services. You can find out how we work, things like that. And then just personally, if anyone wants to reach out to me, it's CEO@homelister.com.
Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule to join us here and kind of tell us what's the future of real estate look like.
Yeah, I hope so. It was a great pleasure talking with you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And again, everybody, I appreciate you guys listening and watching here. Again, reminder, if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe, and on your favorite podcast channel, share the episode, share the podcast. Let's get some of this great information out to more people. And let's look forward to seeing you guys and talking to you next week on the next episode.
Thanks for joining us, and please remember to go and subscribe, like, share, all that cool stuff to help us grow, and come back to listen to our next episode. Until then, go out and live life uncensored.
Thanks for listening to the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast. Don't forget to help us out and subscribe. Follow and give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. And check us out on YouTube for the full video podcast. If you want more information on any of the topics discussed on today's episode, email us at uncensoredrealestatepodcast@gmail.com or give the Cardenas Mortgage team a call at 480-331-4684.